May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son Yisrayl Odea Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now entering the sanctuary. I'd now like to present one of the sons of Yisrayl, son Yisrayl Ben.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech is The Clean and the Unclean. When Yahweh created all these things, He created some things clean for man to eat, and some things unclean Yahweh commanded man not to eat. Some things He calls unclean. In Leviticus 11 we see the law of the clean and the unclean. Leviticus 11:3 says, You may eat any animal that has a split hoof, completely divided, and chews the cud. These you may eat. Verse 4 says, Nevertheless, here are also some that only chew the cud or only have a split hoof. You must not eat. So we can only eat animals that have a split hoof and chew the cud. Here are also clean and unclean fish. And Yahweh tells us who to identify them. Leviticus 11 verse 9 says, These you may eat of all that are in the waters. Whoever has both fins and scales in the waters, whatever in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. It is important that we keep this law because when we don't, our bodies become defiled. If someone eats unclean animal like the pig, they get worms in their body. When we break any of Yahweh's law, we are committing sin, and sin brings death. So let's keep all of Yahweh's law so we can be healthy and make it into Yahweh's kingdom. Praise Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. May Yahweh bless your understanding.
If you all remain standing, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you the first speaker, the great Deacon David Knighton Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Can we have the logo up, please? Today, we're going to be talking about the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Some of you have had the opportunity already to go online and see some of what's being talked about. And the thing about this today is, in case you've ever wondered about those hidden secrets, they are being revealed. And Pastor's been revealing them for a long time. In fact, we're going to be talking about this word. Now, don't let it bother you here, but the word is gematria. Gematria, okay? We're going to be talking about the gematria. This gematria actually proves the words of the witness to be true. It proves these prophecies that have taken place. It puts it to where you can see and you have a proof in front of you there so you can go back and refer to. I want to show one thing on the camera right here. Now, some of you, like myself, may have had their first introduction of any type of gematria in the Mark of the Beast book, which was written in 1976. That's 40-something years ago that Pastor was using this gematria to prove a point, to show what we've been told in Scripture to do, and prophecy actually being fulfilled and a commandment being fulfilled at that time. Look at that right there. You can see that vicarious Filii Dei. That's the Vicar of Christ, and that's what the Pope is called, the Vicar of Christ. And it says here that it literally means in the place of the deity. In the place of the deity. And again, this was written in 1976, and the gematria was being used then, and we didn't understand a lot about it. We didn't. Pastor understood a lot about it, and he still understands a lot about it, and he's sharing it with us and showing us how to use it at this time. In Revelations 13:18, you don't have to turn there right now, but please write it down. It says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast." Now, Psalms 111:10 shows you that a person, it says, a great understanding has he who keeps the laws. Well, Pastor was keeping the laws back then, he's keeping the laws now, and he is the one with the complete understanding, and now he's showing us too. And so with our understanding, we can look at these things and prove them to be true. Not that we don't believe already without seeing, but these are the things that are going to be shared with all the people that we'll be dealing with too, all the multitude that's coming, and it's being shared with them right now on the internet all over the entire world. But it says, "So let him who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So, do you see that right there? Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast. How would you do that without the gematria? All right? Proven right there with that gematria right there that we had in the Mark of the Beast back 40-something years ago. It's there for you. And you saw it then, you see it now, and we're going to have a little bit more for you. So what is the gematria? We're going to go into that a little bit. We're going to share quite a bit with you about that and the secrets, the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. So sit on the edge of your seat, have your pen ready, your paper ready, and write these things down. We'll have them on the slides for you. And with that, if you'll all please stand, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you our our next speaker, the great son of Israel Abel, Barzillai.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today we're going to be continuing on what the great queens of the House of Yahweh spoke about last week, which is the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. In the Holy Scriptures, prophecy describes the only prophesied work of Yahweh being established by two men, whom the Scriptures themselves call witnesses and prophets. Revelations 11 has been the most familiar chapter of the Holy Scriptures, which refers to the two witnesses. However, Revelation 11 has been grossly mistranslated in the King James Version, which mistranslation has caused widespread deception among the whole world. Now, all throughout the Holy Scriptures, we are given accounts from the prophets about the two witnesses. For example, in Isaiah 44 and verse 5, that's found on page 558. Isaiah 44 and verse 5, it says, "One will say, I belong to Yahweh, and the same will call himself with the name of Jacob. The other will subscribe with his hand and write, I belong to Yahweh, and surname himself with the name of Yisrayl." Now the two witnesses are appointed to teach Yahweh's laws in these last days. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, Isaiah chapter 58, Isaiah 58 and verse 1, it says, "Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet. Show my people their transgressions, and the house of Jacob their sins." And also in Revelations, in the book of Revelations, chapter 11, Revelations 11, verses 3 through 4. It says, "And I will give to my two witnesses to perform their prophetic offices, and they will foretell events about the 3.5 years, those cast about with darkness. These are as it were the two olive trees, and as it were the two lamps of the seventh lampstand, ministering for the Father in the earth." It was also prophesied the work that they would be doing. If you'll turn over to page 719, it's Zechariah 5, verses 10 through 11. That's page 719. It says, "Then I said to the Malach who was speaking with me, Where are they, the two witnesses going with the ephah? And he said to me, To build the house of Yahweh, according to the standard of perfection sent by Yahweh's laws, in a Babylonish land that does not yet exist. And there will be land it will be established, and that's at that time when the two witnesses are called out to their work as the established place, the habitation of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh." Now in 1980, Yisrayl Hawkins and Jacob Hawkins dedicated the house of Yahweh. And we can find this information on page 192 of the Two Witnesses book. Now the prophet Isaiah had much to say about the last days and the group of people who would escape to a place of safety. Isaiah calls this group the seed of the two witnesses. From Scripture itself, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 44, verses 1 through 2. It's also found on page 558. It says, "Yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Yisrayl, who I have chosen. This is what Yahweh says, who made you and formed you from the womb, who will help you. Do not be afraid, Jacob, my servant, and Yeshurun, beloved Yisrayl, who I have appointed." Now, Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins used the computer to make these booklets, and if I can get my first slide, if you can see there, it says, "The hidden secrets of the two witnesses in the computer equals 528, 666, and 111. And like the great Deacon David was speaking about, we see this gematria being used first in the mark of the beast. Now, the beginning of the message going out was in 1962 in the town of Eastland, Texas. The witness Jacob asked the questions, and the witness Yisrayl answered them. They hosted a radio show. It was a question and answer show. This was the start of the work in 1962. They were reaching out by a tiny radio show, taking the first steps of the work of Yahweh to teach the laws of Yahweh to all the world. If I can get my second slide. And we can find that information in the Two Witnesses booklet, and also the February 2011 calendar, 2011 prophetic word. Now, for my closing scriptures, in Isaiah 44, in verse 8, it says, "Do not fear, nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time, and have declared you are my witnesses? Is there a source of power except me? Truly there is no other rock. I know not one." And in Revelations 11, verses 7 through 8, Revelations 11, verses 7 through 8, found on page 978, it says, "And whenever they will have finished the evidence written about them, completely performing their testimony concerning future events, the beast, the same which ascends out of the abyss, he will make war with them, and he will overcome them, and he will kill them. And the body of believers, the house of Yahweh, the one seed of the two witnesses, goes into the streets of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Messiah was sacrificed." Now, in conclusion, Yahweh shows very plainly through his prophets that the last day's work upon the earth hinges upon these two men. These two men who were prophesied to begin the last day's work at a certain time. And with that, if you all please stand, I'll turn it over to Son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of God be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. My title today is "The Eastern Lamp Has Gone Out." On the Two Witnesses book, on page 195 and on page 198, it says the great tragedy. And it talks about how he had a dream, and it occurred 3 times, but on the 3rd time it was a terrible tragedy. And the tragedy was expect that someone was dead or dying. Now on page 198, it says, "However, the great tragedy that I had dreamed about had already begun by the time of my visit, and I had not even realized it. It was on Sabbath, March 16, 1991, that I received a phone call from Jacob's wife while I was at the sanctuary in Abelin. She stated Jacob's request that I come at a night of prayer and fasting. I arrived in Odessa the next day. Jacob died on Friday, March 22, 1991, approximately 3 o'clock a.m. He was buried approximately 3 o'clock p.m. the same afternoon. 3:22 is when Jacob died, on March 22, 1991. In the Gematria, it says the two witnesses. If you put in the two witnesses, new light, it shows 3:22. 3:22 is actually when the two witnesses book was made after. And new light means it means new understanding, new things to hear. Please turn over to Isaiah 43, verse 28 on page 558. And it says, therefore I will dissolve the Levitical priesthood and I will give Jacob to the curse and Yisrayl to the reproaches. So he will give Jacob to the curse. He will die. Yahweh's will is that Jacob will be brought back. On the Two Witnesses book, on page 97 and 103, on page 97 it says, may Yahweh be glorified, may Jacob return. And on page 103, it says Yahweh's will is that Jacob will be brought back. So are all of y'all ready yet to receive Jacob and his people? And if you all please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, today I'm going to be continuing on the subject here, the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. And today I'm going to be talking about the explanation of the gematria, or the gematria that's used in this here, the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Now, gematria is a method of interpreting the Hebrew scriptures, words, and phrases by computing the numerical value of words based on those of their consonant letters. Okay, the three methods of gematria used in the hidden secrets of the two witnesses are Hebrew, which is popularly called Jewish, English, and simple gematria. Okay, these three methods of calculation are found by going to www.gematrix.org and simply entering the desired word or phrase you want to calculate. And I have an example if I could get my first slide. Alright, so you can see there on that first slide there, it has the gematria, it has for a computer, and Pastor told us already that it equals out to 666, but you can see there how it calculates it in the Jewish, the English, and the simple, alright? So, Pastor, this is not something new, this is not something that has just newly come about. Pastor had told us about this, if I could get my second slide, but he told us about this in the Mark of the Beast, and he told us about how computer equals 666 and New York and so on, if I could get my next slide. But on page 143 of the Mark of the Beast, Pastor's talking about here, and he's talking about the gematria, and he says, by using this system we find two words, Lucifer, which is Satan, and hell or Hades, which is the grave, and which equals out to 666. And then on the if I could get my next slide, he talks about how New York equals out to 666 and Mark of Beast equals out to 666. All right, so this is not something that's new. Okay, this has been this was in the Mark of the Beast, which was written in 1976 and which was published in 1985. Okay, so an explanation of how each letter is calculated in the Jewish, English, and simple gematria can be found at www.gematrix.org. Okay, so once a word, sentence, or phrase is entered and the numbers appear, the next step is to find a Strong's exhaustive concordance of the Bible. Okay, we recommend the Strongest Strongs. And I don't know if you could see this, but this is the Strongest Strongs right here. All right, and you to look up the numbers in the back of the Strong's in the Hebrew and or Greek dictionary. All right, and we can see here in the back it has the Hebrew, it has all the numbers, the Hebrew numbers, and in the Greek, and it has the definitions here to the numbers. Okay? So, you can see that there, but the meanings and the definitions in the back, these are the numbers and the definitions to the numbers, okay? And then an introduction on how to get the most out of your Strong's Concordance can be found at the beginning of the Concordance. Okay, so if you don't have a hard copy of Strong's, you can Google search the definition. You know, you type in the number. For example, you could type in like 1364 and hit enter, 1364 in Strong's, you know, if you want Hebrew or Greek, and you hit enter in the search bar of Google, and a list of Hebrew or Greek sources will appear. And you know, we recommend using Bible Hub. You know, it's almost always at the top of the Google search. Okay, so you will find that these meanings and definitions of the words will corroborate, strengthen, confirm, establish, sustain, and support the writings and the literature of the House of Yahweh. Okay, beginning with the Mark of the Beast, which was written in 1976 and was published in 1985. Okay, so we will begin by revealing the hidden secrets of Yahweh's two witnesses. Alright, so you can acquire a copy of the book, The Two Witnesses, A New Light, by calling 325-893-5899. Alright, I'll repeat that. That's 325-893-5899. Or you may acquire if I could get my next slide, you can acquire a copy of the February 2011 special issue of the Prophetic Word magazine about the two witnesses by going to Yahweh.com and following that link there. Okay? So it is important for us to understand that it is only Yahweh who can reveal these secrets. Only Yahweh can reveal these secrets. And He doesn't reveal them just anywhere. He reveals them at His house. Okay, if we could turn over to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, chapter 29. And verse 29, and it's found on page 172, and it says, "The secret things belong to Yahweh our Father, but the things revealed to us, every word that proceeds from Yahweh's mouth, belong to us and to our children forever, so that we may perform and do all the words of this law." Okay? And then the next scripture I have is Daniel 2. We could look over to the book of Daniel, chapter 2. And let's look over to verse 22. It's found on page 672. And it says, "You reveal the deep and secret things. You know what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with you." And if we look down to verse 28, it says, "But there is a Father in heaven who reveals secrets. Okay, and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions in your mind as you lay on your bed are these." Alright, so this was Daniel. And whenever he had revealed what the dream meant to Nebuchadnezzar, okay, King Nebuchadnezzar. Alright, so these things are not revealed just anywhere, but they are revealed at the house of Yahweh. Okay, by His anointed servant, He reveals the interpretation. If we look over to Daniel 5 and verse 12, for my last scripture, Daniel 5 verse 12, it's found on page 676. And it says, "For because there is an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding was found in Daniel, who the king named Belshazzar, for his interpretation of dreams, solving of riddles and dark sayings, and dissolving of difficulties. Now may Daniel be summoned, and may he reveal the interpretation." Okay, so it is Yahweh who is in full control of His creation. Yahweh has revealed the secrets only to His house, the house of Yahweh established in Abelin, Texas, in these last days, and His last days anointed witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. Okay, with that, that's all the time I have. If everyone will please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, the great Deacon White Buffalo.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today we're going to be talking about the two witnesses, but I'm going to be talking about one phrase in particular. Please turn over to Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 3. Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 3.
that's on page 718. It says, "And there are 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side of it." Please turn to Revelation chapter 11 and verse 4. And Revelation chapter 11 is a commonly known scripture among the world that speaks about the 2 witnesses. Revelation 11 verse 4 on page 978 says, "These are the 2 olive trees, and the 2 lamps of the 7-lamp lampstand, ministering for the Father in the earth." So if we can see there, the 2 phrases are, or the 2 scriptures show the phrase, the 2 olive trees. Could I have my first slide? Okay, so when the 2 olive trees is entered into the gematria, the Hebrew gematria, commonly called Jewish, equals 2227. And that's the number that I'm going to be focusing on today. So 2227, if I could have my next slide. 2227 in the Hebrew, it means Zerah from 2226, which means rising, which is from 2225, which means a rising of light, shining, dawning, from 2224, which means to rise as the sun, arise, rise up, to come out, appear, break out, shine, as soon as it is up. And 2227 in the Greek means, if I can have my next slide, it means to make alive, make that which was dead to live, cause to live, quicken, give life, impart life, life-giving, made alive, restore to life, of seed, come to life, of seeds quickening into life, germinating, springing up, and growing. Now 2227 in the Strong's Hebrew, which we already covered, if I can have my next slide. If we remember the sign in the clouds that was over the House of Yahweh sanctuary on 2/16/2012, okay, and that's a palindrome date, okay, pointing to that number. Yahweh wants us to get that number. And 216 means light, as we're going to see later on. And that was a picture, the sign in the clouds of Pastor and the light coming out of his eyes, his mouth, and he was clothed in a tallit of light. So the 2 olive trees that are shown in Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 14 and Revelation chapter 11 and verse 3 to be the 2 witnesses ministering for Yahweh. The 2 witnesses are Jacob and Yisrayl, spoken of in Isaiah chapter 44 and verse 1 for your notes. Isaiah 43 and verse 28 shows the witness Jacob given to the curse, which is death, and the remaining witness Yisrayl given to reproaches. If I can have my next slide, hated above all people for Yahweh's sake. Okay, and we remember this when Pastor was being led into the courtroom, and he said, "What a beautiful sight," when he saw the saints of Yahweh standing around. And there was a sign in the clouds that showed this when Yahweh turned his curse into a blessing. And also my next slide, it was proven in the courts of the face of the earth here, the courts of the beastly governmental system, that Yisrael Hawkins is hated above all people for Yahweh's sake. And we see that in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 9. So 2 witnesses, they teach the truth. The truth is Yahweh's law, and the truth is light. And we can see that in Psalms 119, 142, if you can turn there. Psalms 119, 142. On page 486, it says, "Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, because your law is the truth." So 1 mouth, 1 spokesman, 1 messenger of the 2 witnesses is sent and chosen to speak the word of Yahweh's law and Yahweh's prophets. Yisrael Hawkins. is that messenger. If I could have my next slide, the Two Witnesses New Light book on page 211 to 212, also page 212, Pastor Joe Hawkins writes, "You see two men, the two witnesses, described as olive trees, teaching the last two congregations of the house of Yahweh, the last two lamps on the seven lampstand. These two witnesses are pouring the golden oil of Yahweh's pure truth into the house of Yahweh in these last days, just as Yahshua Messiah did for his disciples. Pure olive oil represents the pure truth, which are Yahweh's pure laws. This is Yahweh's pure oil. This is Yahweh's pure oil, the laws, statutes, commandments, judgments, and ordinances, which pure oil flows from Yahweh's Spirit Holy to Yahweh's two witnesses, the two olive trees feeding the two lampstands." So it's interesting to note that number 211 in Strong's Hebrew is the word ophir, and means characteristic of fine gold. Ophir, which is word 211, is found in Genesis 2:11, if we can turn there. Genesis chapter 2, verse 11. In fact, I'm just going to paraphrase it. It says, "It is the one that encompasses the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold." And Havilah was an actual brother of Ophir. And both were sons of Yoktan, which you can see in Genesis chapter 10, verse 29 for your notes. And to top off this 211 gold connection with the golden oil of the two olive trees, the February 2011 edition of the Prophetic Word magazine was entitled The Two Witnesses, if I can have my next slide, which consisted of sermons that were given by Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins beginning on 1/1/2011 regarding the two witnesses. This issue has been posted on Yahweh.com since that time for all the world to learn about the two witnesses. In the 211 issue, Pastor expounds on the golden lampstand and the golden oil. Finally, incredibly, on page 211 of the Two Witnesses New Light book, Pastor wrote about the golden oil. And this book was published in 1991. Pastor then goes on to explain that Yahweh's pure oil stopped flowing from the witness Jacob when Jacob began to introduce customs from the east, like the tradition of the milk and the meat and things like that. The witness Jacob was then given to the curse, which is death at that time, as Isaiah chapter 43 and verse 28 shows. That left one light remaining, which is the western lamp, the house of Yahweh, led by the witness Yisrayl Hawkins in Abelin, Texas. Pastor wrote in the House of Yahweh Established on page 62. House of Yahweh Established, page 62, if I can have my next slide. He said, "Therefore the seed of the two witnesses will begin first in this world to shine forth as separated, distinct, and having understanding and wisdom, being present to call together and convoke to the courts of the house of Yahweh, the place of offerings, truly guaranteeing from the west." So it's the last work, the seventh light, the western lamp, led by the seventh Malik, Yisrayl Hawkins, that is enlightening the world at this time. And the recent Sermon Protection Act, which was Senate Bill 24, signed by Greg Abbott in the state of Texas, affirmed and guaranteed certain constitutional religious protections that apply to Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins should the beastly governmental system come against him like a flood regarding the content of his sermons. So if I can have my next slide, this is Senate Bill 24, and it was entered into Senate Journal page 2226. And 2226 stems from 2227, which is the same number in the gematria of the two olive trees. The Sermon Protection Act was shown in gematria to mean Yahweh and from heaven, proving that Yahweh is encamping about his house and affording us the protection promised us to finish the work. Let's look at Zechariah chapter 9, verse 8. It says, "And I will encamp around my house like a guard against those who march in and out. No more will an oppressor overrun them, for now my eyes are watching over them. So this verse shows the witness Yisrayl, the chosen branch, the man clothed in linen, pouring out the golden oil of the pure laws, Yahweh's power upon his seed, and clothing them with white robes during this times and the dividing of times, preparing them for the promise made in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. Strong's Greek 2227 shows that these laws are taught by the last olive tree, are life, and bring life to all who learn, keep, and teach them to others, causing others to also have life. The seed of Yisrayl Hawkins will also participate and assist in resurrecting the dead, as shown in Daniel 12:2 and Hebrews 11 verses 39 to 40. These teachers, the seeds of the greatest teacher in the world, Yisrael Hawkins, who turned many to righteousness, will shine as the stars of heaven. The faithful followers of Yahweh are compared to green olive trees in the house of Yahweh, and their children are said to be like the shoots that appear at the tree's roots, guaranteeing its continuance. For my last scripture, please turn to Psalm 128, verse 3 and 6. Psalms chapter 128 and verses 3 and 6. It says, "Your wife will be like a fruitful vine at the sides of your house, and your children will be olive plants around your table." And verse 6 says, "Yes, you will live and see your children's children. May Yahweh give you these. Behold the blessings on the man who reverences and worships Yahweh. Peace be upon Israel." With that, that's all the time I have, and I'd like to turn over to the next speaker, Deacon Buffalo Bill Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Could I have my slide, please? Today I'm going to be covering the second gematria number for the two olive trees. This is the English gematria, number 1326. And we're going to look at the two meanings of 1326. Could I have my next slide? So the first meaning means end, destruction, waste. From 1324. Next slide, please. Number 1324, bath, a Hebrew measure, instrument for pressing olives. Could I have my next slide? 1326 in the Greek means to arouse completely. I wake out of sleep, I wake out of sleep, arouse in general, stir up, arouse completely, stir, stirred, stirring, woke. Exodus 25:37 says to make 7 lamps on the 7-lamp lampstand to light the space in front of it. The 7th lamp is burning at this time, and the golden olive oil of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that comes from learning and keeping Yahweh's laws. The golden oil of perfection is flowing from the chosen olive branch onto each one of us to make us like fine polished gold, completely obedient to all of Yahweh's laws. Can I have my next slide? The house of Yahweh is the only light in a world that is in complete darkness. As you see in the picture, there's darkness and the light shining into this darkness. The light is like the laws of Yahweh going out to this world that's deceived and in darkness. As the scripture says, the world's occupants are dead in their trespasses and sins. Please turn to Ephesians 2. Turn to Ephesians 2. And please look at verse 1. "And to you who are dead in your trespasses and sins." See, the world is dead in their trespasses and sins, and asleep to what is taking place. The world will soon wake to the fact that sin is the cause of suffering, of all the suffering, misery, hatred, and wars they see around them. Yahweh will awake them from their sleep through great tribulation and the teachings of the seventh messenger. Can I have my picture? Satan will be bound and no longer be spreading deception any longer. Righteousness will prevail. It is the job of the two witnesses to preach about this time of trouble and the tribulation. Please turn to Revelations 11. Please turn to Revelations 11, verse 3. And it says, I will give to my two witnesses to perform their prophetic offices, and they will foretell events about the 3.5 years those cast about with darkness. That is their job, to foretell this time. But also these definitions also remind us of the time of trouble, which will be the worst there ever was or ever will be. Please turn to Daniel 12. Daniel 12, verse 1, and I'm going to be reading from the newest translation. It says, And at that time Satan will stand before seated judges and before the heavenly court of Yahweh to put down Yisrayl, the greatest priest who is like Yahweh and stands at Abel for the children of your people. And there will be a time of trouble such as there never was since there was a nation to that same time, and at that time your people will escape to the protected place of Yahweh, everyone found written in the book of life. Also, please turn to Matthew 24. Matthew 24 and verse 21. For then will be a great tribulation such as never come to pass since the beginning of the world to this time, never will be. There will be this great time of trouble where mankind will abruptly descend into a precipice of gloom and anguish and thick darkness. Please turn to Isaiah 8 for my closing scripture. Isaiah 8 and verse 22. They will look to the earth and behold darkness, gloom and anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. It will be a time 3.5 years cut short, where about 2 billion people will be harvested into the house of Yahweh. This will be a time of great pressure. Isaiah said that the world will be hard pressed and hungry. To continue in bringing this more information on the two witnesses, if you'd all please stand. I'd like to turn the services over to the great Deacon Samuel.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Praise Yahweh. Awesome information coming forth today. Can I have my first slide, please? And I want to remind everyone about this number here, 1326. Can everyone see that? 1326. Remember, it says end and destruction. Remember, who is foretelling these events in these last days? Who is it? Yisrayl Hawkins. He's the only one in the whole world foretelling these events. And we're entering into this these last 3.5 years, and we're gonna receive some testing. But we're gonna go through it, brothers and sisters. But we have to, as I'm going to show, this pressure. Remember the instrument of pressuring in the next slide, 1324. Remember, it showed there the instrument of pressing olives. We're going to go through some pressure. It's very interesting that this number comes up and it talks about this pressing of olives. Because if you have your scriptures, turn to Matthew 26:37. And this is something that is reminded of us every year on Yeshua's memorial, of what Yeshua, our high priest, did for us. And he went through some pressure too. He went through the same pressure. He's going through the same pressure. He went through the same pressure, or he went through pressure, and also our last day's witness went through some pressure also. But Matthew 26 and verse 37, and really pay attention to the words that our Savior said here. Matthew 26 verse 37. But he took Kepha and the two sons of Zebedee with him and began to be filled with anguish and deep distress. And remember, this time period, our high priest Yeshua, this was his final hour. And he was at, if you look at the subtitle there, it says prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where he was. And notice he said he was in anguish and deep distress. Well, how did he know that? How did he know he was in deep anguish? Or why he was in deep anguish and distress? Well, remember what he was going to do, what he had to accomplish. He had to die for our sins, brothers and sisters. He knew the prophecies that was concerning of him. You know, I want to remind you, in Yachanan, turn there, Yachanan 13 verse 1. Yachanan 13 verse 1, and page 830, it says, Now before the feast of Passover, when Yeshua knew his hour had come, that he should depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. You know, Yeshua knew what was going to come upon him. The torture he had to go through, the sorrow, that's why he was in such deep anguish at that time. You know, he suffered a horrible death. If you also look at verse 38, and then he said to them, I am deeply grieved to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me. You know, I'd encourage you just to get your mindset of how serious Yeshua's mindset was in going through this. You know, the House of Yahweh brought out a video actually recreating that event at the Garden of Gethsemane. But the word is very interesting. The word Gethsemane, the next slide here, and this is actually from the Wikipedia. It actually means oil press. Oil press. The pressure, remember 1324, talking about the instrument of pressing olives? And notice here it says, as the Garden of Gethsemane is a garden at the foot of the mountains of olives in Jerusalem. You know, the pressure that Yeshua went through, you know, Pastor went through anguish and pressure too, as we all should know. He was arrested on false charges, accused of crimes that he did not commit. And just to write in your notes, you know, Pastor gave an account of what he went through. Of what he went through when he was arrested and put into jail. In the 11th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 26, verses 22 through 24. And this sermon date was given on 6/25/11. And, you know, Pastor said that he was in great agony and suffering in what he was being put through by the beastly system. Now, this is the beastly system, the torture tactics. You know, and he was put through this beastly system through various physical and mental tortures. Mental torture tactics, including air conditioning, full blast into a cell in the dead of winter, a blanket too short and with holes, a cold plastic mattress, and sleep deprivation. This is what our great pastor Yisrayl had to go through. Our high priest Yeshua went through what he had to go through. But this is the great pressure, examples of what we're talking about here, about this pressing of oils. Why is this so important? You know, turn to Leviticus. Because remember, we're talking about this pressing of the oil, the olive oil. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 2. It says, command the children of Israel to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light. Now remember, the great Deacon Buffalo Bill just talked about that light there. So that the lamp may be kept burning continually. But notice there it says the pressed olives. And notice there it says clear oil of pressed olives. And in the King James Version, it means beaten oil. Or in other words, the first oil, the finest. The finest oil. Brothers and sisters, do you believe that through Yisrayl Hawkins and also our high priest comes forth the finest oil? There's none like it. But this pressed oil, also in Exodus 29 verse 40. Exodus 29 verse 40. If you turn there, Exodus 29 verse 40. And this is on page 70. It says, with the first lambs, offer 1/10 of the ephah, about 2 quarters, in fine flour, mixed with 1/4 of a hin, about 1/4 of oil from pressed olives, and 1/4 of a hin, about 1 quart of wine, as a drink offering. There it goes again, the pressed oil. But I want to bring back to your attention the tribulation. Remember, the 326 talk about the end, the destruction. That's the tribulation that we're getting into at this time. But this tribulation, can I get my next slide? In Strong's is 2347. Now notice this again. The word pressing together, pressure, trouble. And then, can I get my next slide? 2346. 2346 means press hard upon. Persecuted. It says to press, to afflict. And the reading on it says, press together, like when circumstances rub us the wrong way. That makes us feel confined. Everyone feeling the pressure lately? Now, this is something that's been prophesied that we have to go through this worst tribulation. Even to the point of trauma. This pressure and anguish. Because why? Why is it so important to go through these things? Just to encourage everyone, remember we're talking about the two olive trees, right? And remember, only those olive leaves who hold fast to the chosen branch. Who's the chosen branch? Right, of the 2 olive trees. During this tribulation and testing that we know we're going through, and drink from the same cup as Yeshua Messiah did, that he drank from, will only be qualified and worthy of the top positions in the soon coming kingdom. So, brothers and sisters, we should be thankful for these pressures, these tests, because Yahweh is proving, through these tests and trials, that we want these top positions. Do we not want these top positions, brothers and sisters? Only through this pressure and test, this tribulation, can we qualify them. Praise Yahweh. So I encourage everyone, encourage one another. Be there for your brothers. Be there for your sisters in this time of testing and tribulation. Because remember, together we're going to get into this kingdom. Praise Yahweh. If you all please stand. I'd like to now turn to the great son of Israel, Deacon Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Alright, we're going to be continuing in the hidden secrets of the 2 witnesses. Now, can I have my first slide? There you go. Alright, today we're going to be talking about the 2 olive trees in simple gematria. Alright, and that equals 221. Now that phrase, if you could turn with me quick to Revelations 11. Revelations 11, it's on page 977. Verse 3 and 4, it says, "And I will give to my 2 witnesses to perform their prophetic offices
and they will foretell events about the 3.5 years, those cast about with darkness. These are the 2 olive trees, and as it were the 2 lamps of the 7-lamp lampstand, ministering for the Father in the earth. So there you see that phrase, the 2 olive trees. Now this phrase in simple gematria equals 221. Now 221, can I have my next slide? Alright, 221, as you can see there, it means fiery, and it comes from 215. Next slide. It comes from 215, which means to shine, to be or become light, be bright, to give light, given us light, shed light. Now to shine, let's turn over to Daniel. Daniel 12. This word shine, it's on page 684. Daniel 12 and verse 3, it says, and those who are wise, and remember, Pastor brought that out, those who are the teachers, those who instruct people in the way of Yahweh. Those who are wise will shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. And also, this definition, it also means enlighten. And that's talking about the commission of the 2 witnesses. Now the witness Jacob, his light went out after being given to the curse. And that's what the prophecy says, and we learned about that this morning. Jacob's light going out on 3/22/91. Now Yahweh's last days anointed witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, the spokesman of the 2 witnesses, has continued to enlighten this world, through his teachings every Sabbath, separating the way of the world from the way of Yahweh. If we could turn over to Revelations 18. Revelations 18, it's on page 982. Enlightening this world. It says, verse 1, and after these things I saw another Malach come down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was enlightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of demons, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Look down to verse 4, it says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so that you do not partake in her sins, and so that you do not receive of her plagues. So remember in verse 1 it says, and the earth was enlightened. And that's what Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins is doing when he comes up here every Sabbath. He's enlightening the world and showing us the way of Yahweh. Let's also turn to Isaiah 49. This word enlighten. Isaiah 49. On page 561. And let's look at verse 3 and 6. It says, and he said to me, this is talking about Yisrael, and he said to me, you are my servant, O Yisrael, through whom I will be glorified. Look down to verse 6, it says, and he said, it is not enough that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the protected of Israel. I will also give you for a light to the Gentiles, so you may be my salvation to the ends of the earth. So there you see, Yisrayl Hawkins is the light. Now, separating the way of the world from the way of Yahweh. That's in Zechariah 5. Zechariah 5 and verse 9. It says, then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, 2 women, the last 2 heirs of the house of Yahweh, sent with commandment. The Spirit of Yahweh came to overspread them, and they were covered with the covering of the saints. And they exalted, magnified, and extolled the ephah, the standard of perfection sent by Yahweh's laws, separating the ways of the world from the way of Yahweh. Now the western lamp of the 7th lamp lampstand, the House of Yahweh in Abelin, Texas, led by the seventh messenger, Yisrayl Hawkins, is the only light to this dying world at this time. You know, there's no one else in the world teaching Yahweh's laws. Praise Yahweh. There's no one else in the world teaching Yahweh's laws. Even the churches, you know, some of them may try, but they still mix in the evil. Let's turn to Isaiah 42. Isaiah 42 in verse 6. It says, I Yahweh, it says, I Yahweh have called you in righteousness, and will hold your hand. I will keep you, and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, the nations. So Yisrayl Hawkins is the only light to this dying world. Now on 2/16/12, that's a palindrome date. That means you can read it forward or backward. The witness Yisrael's face was seen above the House of Yahweh sanctuary. Can I have my fourth slide? There you go. Light was emitting from his eyes and mouth, and he was clothed in a tallit of light. As you can see in that picture, this is from the 2015 calendar, I believe. Now you can see here the witness Yisrael's face, and you can see the light emitting out of it. And that's what, if you remember, that's what 2:15 meant. It meant light. Alright, my next slide. Now 2:16, Yeshua Messiah placed this sign over the sanctuary on 2:16, because 2:16 in Strong's Hebrew, as you can see there, it means light. It means a light, sunshine, daylight. It comes from, it also means light of salvation, bright, clear, light of a face, a bright, cheerful face. That's what that's what this word means. Alright, now the light. If you can turn to Psalms 119, remember this light is Yahweh's law. If you can turn to Psalms 119 verse 105, it says, your law is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. You know, that's what gives this light, the laws. Verse 130, it says, the unfolding of your laws give light. They give understanding to the simple. And also, if you can turn to Yachanan 1, verse 4 and 5. It's on page 814. It says, in this plan was life, and that life was the light to mankind. Now the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not take hold of it. And the world's not taking on to this light, but they will eventually. Now all of these meanings are found in 2:16 in Strong's Hebrew. Hebrew 2:16 was a palindrome date because the date is read 2:16 forward and backward. So this is a double witness that points to the last anointed witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, is the only source of light to this world, who is enlightening Yahweh's people and all of mankind. Through his teachings, he is causing Yahweh's face to shine upon all of his people, imparting Yahweh's Spirit Holy, or Yahweh's character, within each of us. In doing so, he is placing Yahweh's name upon all of us, as you can see in Numbers 6:22-27 for your notes, which is the blessing. Now the House of Yahweh offers salvation today, beginning with the keeping of Yahweh's Sabbath at his house. And that's where Yisrayl Hawkins is enlightening us, and that's what the numbers are showing. And with that, if everyone will please stand. Let's turn over to the great deacon Jacob Hawkins. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, I'll be continuing with the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Please turn to Revelation 11 one more time. Revelation 11. Now let's read verse 4. Verse 4. That's found on page 978, Revelation 11:4. It says, these are as it were the 2 olive trees, and as it were the 2 lamps, it says, of the seven lamp lampstand. Okay, now notice there the 2 lamps. Well, that's what I'll be speaking on today, the 2 lamps, and the words there of the seven lamp lampstand were added. Okay, so we're going to look up the 2 lamps in gematria. Can I have the first slide, please? As everyone can see, the first number that comes up for the 2 lamps is 1364. Can I get slide 2 now? Okay, now you see 1364, that's in Hebrew, it means high and exalted. You see here, higher officials or official. Okay, well, what is high or exalted? Does anyone know? The house of Yahweh. Let's turn to Isaiah 2. Isaiah 2, verse 2, it says, it will come to pass in the last days that the mountain promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations and will be raised. What does that word raised mean? It means exalted or high. Okay, it will be raised above all congregations. Okay, so there's one meaning of it. Now, can I get the next slide? You see it means to be high and exalted. Also exalt and exalted. Okay, now let's go to Yekexkia. This is talking about a servant of Yahweh and also of trees. Let's go to Yekexkia 17. Yekexkia 17, found on page 639. Verse 24, and it says, and all the trees of the field will know that I, Yahweh, have brought down the high tree and exalted the low tree. Notice that word exalted there. Exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree flourish. I, Yahweh, have spoken and have done it. Now, look at that side note there, G3. It says, all the world shall know that I have brought down the proud enemy. Okay, this is what Yahweh's saying here. Brought down that high tree, the proud enemy, and set up my house, which was low and condemned by the world. So you see there, he's brought up his house. And what is his house? Does anyone know? What is Yahweh's house? The house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Okay, now in the 2 Witnesses book, the New Light, on page 211, as you can see here, page 211, that's of the New Light book, it says, you see 2 men, the 2 witnesses described as olive trees, teaching the last 2 congregations of the house of Yahweh, the last 2 lamps on the 7 lamp lampstand. These 2 witnesses are pouring the golden oil of Yahweh's pure truth into the house of Yahweh in these last days. Okay, now on page 212, well, let's not go to that yet. Can I get the next slide, please? This is Greek for 1364. It means twice, doubly, and twice. Now, can I get the next slide? Then it's from 1417 duo, which means two, and then you see there are 2 men. Okay, well, what are those 2 men? Does anyone know? Those are the 2 witnesses. Okay, in fact, this is the same word used in Revelation 11. Let's go back there. Revelation 11, found on page 978, Revelation 11:4. It says, these are the 2 olive trees, as it were, the 2 lambs. Well, can I get the next slide? you'll see in the next slide, Revelation 11:4, you see there 14:17 is the 2 olive trees and also the 2 lampstands. Does everyone see that? Praise Yahweh. Okay, 14:17 is the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands. Okay, so that's the same word used there, speaking of the 2 witnesses. Now on page 212 of the 2 witnesses book, it says, these last 2 lamps represent the last 2 works of Yahweh for these last days. It says these last 2 lamps represent the last 2 works of Yahweh in these last days. Those are the 2 works. Okay? Now, also, talking about 2:12, if you go to Genesis 2:12, found on page 2, it says, and the gold of that land is of high quality, pearls and the onyx stone are there. Okay, that's 2:11 and 2:12, which is talking about gold. Well, if you look at the 2 Witnesses book, on page 2:11 and 2:12, well, what is it talking about? Well, it's talking about gold as well. Okay, so you can read it for yourself. The 2 Witnesses, the New Light book, on page 2:11 and 2:12. Now, how can anyone do this but Yahweh? Okay, so you can see Yahweh is working with His house here in these last days. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn over to son of Yisrayl, Odeya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I will be continuing on the 2 lamps, on number 9:12. I have my first slide. 2 lamps in English gematria is 9:12. Servant of Yahweh, or servant is worshiper of Yahweh. I have my next slide. Okay, servant of Yahweh also means servant, worshiper of Yahweh, which that's what 2 witnesses do. They worship Yahweh. Jacob worshipped Yahweh, and Yisrayl worships Yahweh still to this day. If y'all please turn to Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44 in verse 21. On page 558. And it says, remember those lessons about the worship of God's Elohim, O Jacob and Yisrayl, for you are servant. I made you a servant to me, O Yisrayl. You will not be forgotten by me. So Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins and his brother Jacob are both called the servants of Yahweh, and two times the chosen branch and one of the witnesses. Now let's look on page 9:12 in your book of Yahweh. Oh, before I do that, show the next. Can I have my next slide? And 9:12 in Greek means son of Abba. Now, if you can turn to Revelations 1:1. On page 971. In verse 1 it says,
the revelation of Yahshua Messiah, which Yahweh gives to him to show the servants things which must surely come to pass, and he sent to signify it through his Malach to his servant Yachanan, which he is talking about the two witnesses, Yisrayl and Jacob. Now let's go to page 912 in the Book of Yahweh. And 912 in the Greek can I have my slide again? Means son of Abba. And on page 912 is Galatians 4:6. 4:6 on page 912, and it says, "And because you are the son, because you are sons, Yahweh sent, cried Abba, no, for the spirit of his sons into your hearts, which cries, Abba, Father." So, and also 2 weeks ago, Deacon David talked about the number 5 that was saw above the sanctuary, and number 5 also means Abba and Father. And with that, if you all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to Son of Yisrayl, Levi.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. So today I'm going to be continuing off where the other speakers left off on the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Can I have my first slide, please? Okay, so the two lamps in simple gematria is 152, and that's the number I'm going to be going over today. So 152 in Strong's Hebrew, it comes from word number 142, and it means wide, great. It means glorious. And if you can turn over in your books of Yahweh to page 719, it's Zechariah 6 verse 13, and it says, "Yes, he will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory, and he will sit and rule on his throne. He will be a priest upon his throne, and the council of peace will be between them both." So as you see there, this person who's going to build the house of Yahweh, which is Yisrael Hawkins, he's going to bear glory. And one of the meanings here is glorious. Another one of the definitions is honorable. And if you can turn over to page 557, in your books, CI, page 557. It's Isaiah 43 and verse 1 and verse 4. It says, "But now this is what Yahweh says, who created you, O Jacob, and who formed you, O Yisrael. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, for you are mine." And verse 4 says, "Because you were precious in my sight, you have been honorable." Notice that word honorable. "And I have loved you, so I will give men for you and people for your life." And if you can also turn over to Revelations. Revelations 3:9, and it says, "Behold," Revelation 3:9, page 973, it says, "Behold, I give out of those of the assembly of the accuser, who preach themselves to be those who worship Yahweh, but they are not, but they attempt to deceive by falsehood. Behold, I appoint them for the purpose of worshiping in your presence of your footstool, and they will understand that I have loved you." if you can also turn back to Isaiah, page 557, Isaiah 42, and verse 21. It says, Yahweh is well pleased for his righteousness' sake to magnify the law and make it honorable. So this is the reason that Yahweh loves Yisrayl Hawkins, is because he magnifies the law and makes it honorable. Another meaning is the word Strong's Hebrew number 152 comes from 4428, and it means royal, kingdom, kings and kings. And in the 2015 calendar, in the month of November, in the 2015 calendar, it talks about the word purple. And it says, purple is the rank and character of Yahweh's kings and queens. It represents royal positions in Yahweh's soon coming kingdom. It also comes from word number 4427, and it means Malik, meaning to take counsel, to consult, and it means to make to rule, or surely rule. And as we know, the name Yisrayl means he who rules as Yahweh rules. So, can I have my next slide? So whenever you add up all the numbers that we went over for the gematria of the two lamps, it totals 2428. Can I have my next slide? 2428 in Strong's Greek means an olive branch. And as we know, as it says in Zechariah, it says, Yisrayl Hawkins is the chosen branch. And if you can turn over to Zechariah 6 and verse 12, it's on page 719. Zechariah 6 and verse 12. It says, Speak to him and say, This is what Yahweh of hosts says. Behold the man whose name is the branch, for he will branch out of his place, and he will build the house of Yahweh. And as we know, Yisrayl Hawkins built the house of Yahweh. It also means an earnest supplication for peace. And 2428 in Strong's Hebrew, it means able, excellent, great, power, strength, strong, and virtuous. And in the House of Yahweh Established book, on page 28, it says, according to the Gesenius Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament, the phrase keeper of sheep comes from the Hebrew word 7462 and means teacher of virtue. Down in the next paragraph, it says, the word virtue means the equality of moral righteousness or excellence. We find in Deuteronomy 6 verse 25 that righteousness is a performance of Yahweh's 613 laws. Therefore, the phrase keeper of sheep is translated the teacher of righteousness. And who is the teacher of righteousness in these last days? Yisrayl Hawkins. So we can see that all these numbers are pointing to the two witnesses are the two lamps. And with that, if you all please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, son of Yisrael, Yeshaya.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, today I'm going to be going over the words Yobel and Yabal. And these words are found in Isaiah 44. They come from the word watercourses. But let's take a closer look at them. First, on page 70 and 71, in the House of Yahweh Established booklet. It says on page 70, the Hebrew word Yobel also developed from the word Yabal. And then across over another page on 71, it says, the meaning of the root word Yabal means the year of release, the Jubilee, which marks freedom from this world. Now, this information comes from the lexicon in various Testament, and on page 359 and 357. Now, the Hebrew meaning of Yobel comes from Yabal, which means the year of release, like I said. And could I have my first slide? Now, in Gematria, the word Yobel comes out to be 477 in the Jewish, as you can see on the screen. Now I'm going to focus on the number 477. And it means in the Hebrew, mighty one. Mighty one is salvation, and the mighty one is Yahweh. Mighty one, Yahweh is salvation. And salvation is only offered at the House of Yahweh in Abelin. And in the House of Yahweh Established booklet again, on page 70, it shows how the word Yabal, the word Abel comes from the word Yabal. Now, 477 in the Greek is a proposition, tenet, opinion, advanced against another, opposition. And the House of Yahweh is opposing Babylon. Now, we can also say that pastor is opposing Babylon. But let's prove it. Please turn with me to Zechariah 4, 3 through 10 on page 718. It says, and there are 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl and another upon the left side of it. And I spoke to the Malach who talked with me, and I asked him, what are these, my ruler? Then the Malach who talked with me answered and said to me, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my ruler. So he answered and spoke to me, saying, this is the word of Yahweh to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says Yahweh of hosts. Who are you, O great mountains? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain, and he will bring out its capstone to shouts of blessing upon it. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of the house of Yahweh. His hands will also finish it, and you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent you. And verse 10 says, For who has despised the day of small things, they will rejoice and will see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel, and the complete knowledge and understanding of Yahweh will go throughout the whole earth. Now, we know that pastor is Zerubbabel because Zerubbabel means he who opposes Babylon. But let's get even some more proof. So, turn to Revelations 22:16 on page 986. It says, I, Yeshua, have sent my Malach to testify to you these things in the congregation of the house of Yahweh. I am the root and offspring of David and the bright morning star. Now, where it says, my Malach, who is the Malach? Yes, Yisrayl Hawkins. But, now could I have my next slide? I took the number 22:16 for Revelations 22:16. I looked it up in the Hebrew, and it means Zerubbabel. So then I went and looked it up in the Greek. Could I have my next slide? And it also means Zerubbabel. So right here where Yeshua says, my Malach, it's referring to Yisrayl Hawkins. He is Zerubbabel, the one who opposes Babylon. Now, aren't we all in agreement that Yisrayl Hawkins is doing that job today? Praise Yahweh. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to Deacon Yedidia.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You know, the numbers that are being brought out, they're not only numbers, but they're proving all of Yahweh's prophecies to be true. And everything that Yisrayl Hawkins has been writing and bringing out over the years, the numbers are backing everything that he's been writing. It's backing them up. Now, if you can give me my first slide, please. I'm going to be covering more about this Yobel, but in the English gematria, it equals to 154. If you can give me the second slide. And 354 in Strong's Hebrew, it means a deer, stag, and it's from word number 352. If you can give me the next slide, please. It means ram, mighty man, oak, a chief, strong, and it also means support. And it's from word number 193. If I could get that slide, please. Now, 193, it means mighty, body, noble. It means be strong, the body as being rolled together. Now, the nobles are the called out ones. Nobles are the called out ones. If you can turn over to Isaiah 13:2. And it's on page 538. Isaiah 13:2 on page 538. And it says on page 538, and it says, lift up a banner upon the high mountain, raise your voice to them, wave your hand, so they may enter the gates of the city, or of the called out ones, the house of Yahweh. Now, on side note D there, if you can go over to side note D, it says, traditionally translated nobles. Okay, so you can see how the numbers are backing up the inspired scriptures and Yahweh's prophecies. Now, turn over to 1 Timothy 3:14. 1 Timothy 3:14 is on page 934. And it says, these things I write to you. Well, up some more. It says, the house of Yahweh, the pillar and ground of the truth. It says, these things I write to you, hoping to come to you shortly. But if I am delayed, I write so that you may know the right and proper way to conduct yourselves. Now remember that word conduct. The right and proper way to conduct yourselves in the house of Yahweh, who are the called out ones, the living Father, the pillar and ground of the truth. Now, this word, the number 354, if you can go to the next slide here, is the number 354 in strong Greek. It means a taking up, ascension, and it's from word number 353, if you can go to the next slide. And it means carry off, lead away, take up, raise, pick, take to, or take to oneself. And it means take in, as in taking out of Babylon and out of confusion and leading to the house of Yahweh in Abelin and Abel. Now remember the word Abelin, remember Abel. And in the house of Yahweh established, if you can go to the next slide, please. In the house of Yahweh established on page 67. At the bottom, or where it's underlined, it says the house of Yahweh was established for the purpose of leading. The house of Yahweh was established for the purpose of leading, conducting, bringing Yahweh's called out ones out of this world, out of Babylon, while leading, conducting, and bringing. Remember that word conducting. While leading, conducting, and bringing them to perfection. So, and remember Timaeus 3:14 through 15. So you can see how these numbers are backing up Yahweh's prophecies, and everything that Yisrael Hawkins wrote years ago, it's backing them up 100%. And with that, if you all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, son of Yisrayl, Deacon Abba Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Okay, so I'm going to continue on where the previous speakers left off on the Yobel and the and Yabal and these numbers here. Now the Yobel in simple gematria is the Abelin in simple gematria is number 59. Okay, got my first slide. Number 59 in Strong's. Okay, Strong's Concordance in Hebrew, it's Abel. Okay, and we all know, Abel's here the place of protection. But it's Abel. Now Yobel is that the root word, of Abel. And kind of my second slide. Now, Yobel, means the year of acquittance. The year of acquittance, and blow the ram's horn or the trumpet, and it ties into the the year of Jubilee. Okay, and in the House of Yahweh Established booklet, okay, on pages 70 through 72, to where it talks about that word, Yabel and Yabal, how it means Abel. Through page 70 through 72, it talks about that. I encourage you to go back and read it. Now that year, or the year of acquittance. Okay, we all know about the year of release. Mennyman's brought sermons about that before. That year, the Jubilee year. Now, the year of acquittance in gematria, if you look that up, it comes out to number 1074. And that's pastor's license plate number, the tag number. Okay, and if you look the number 1074, the meaning there, it traces back to the Benjaminite, and it traces back to 1069. If I can have next slide. 1069, it means to bear fruit, or to consume, or to constitute as a firstborn. Okay, and that traces back to 1061, which means first fruits. Okay, so another word for acquittance is acquittal. Okay, and if you look at Revelation 2:17. Revelations 2:17, and it talks about that acquittal, that acquittance, and that white stone. It says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone, or a sentence of acquittal, and in the stone a restored name Yahweh, Yahweh written, which no one acknowledges except for he who understands." Okay, and also, it's very interesting that on page 217 of the Two Witnesses New Light, this book right here. Okay, page 217, it talks about the 7 eras of the House of Yahweh, represented by these 7 lamps. The 7 periods of history in which Yahweh's prophesied work is established in the earth. But each of these 7 eras of fire, that every word of Yahweh has burned or lighted in these 7 lamps, the House of Yahweh. And it goes on to talk about, the light and that, and the significance of that. And have my next slide. The number 217 in Strong's, number 217 in the Strong's Hebrew, it means a flame, or a fire, or light. And it traces back to 215, if I can have my next slide. 215 means to shine or bright, enlighten, give us light, to shed light, that shining. Okay, and it's the same word that's used, in the in Exodus 25:37. If you look there, where it talks about the building the menorah and building those 7 lamps. This is 25. And verse 37 says, "Then make it 7 lamps and set them upon it so they light the space in front of it." Okay? And that's the same word that it comes from. Now, the 217 in Greek means salt. Okay? Traces back to the word salt. Now, in Matthew 5:13, Yeshua talks about, the salt of the earth and also the light. Look at Matthew 5:13. He says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer fit for anything except to be cast out, to be trodden under the feet of men." In verse 14, he says, "You are the light of the world, a city set on a hill which cannot be hidden. Neither do men light a lamp and hide it underneath a basket, but put it on a lampstand, so it gives light to all those who are in the house. And let your light shine before men, so they may see your righteous works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." Okay, now, so you can see how that light, the lamp, which is the laws of Yahweh, how we are that light. We are the light, and we need to bring that, we're taking that light throughout the rest of this world right now. Now, in Gematria, if you look up Yahweh Tiskanu in Gematria, okay, from Jeremiah 23:5-6, where it talks about how pastor, the branch, is proclaiming the name of Yahweh in these last days. And it shows where pastor, this branch that would be raised up in these last days would proclaim, this to us, Yahweh Tiskanu, or Yahweh our righteousness. Now, Gematria for that, Yahweh Tiskanu, it comes out to 1074 as well, which is also on pastor's license plate number. Now, I don't have enough time to go into that, but you can look that up later on your own time. But 1074 traces back to a family or a generation, and also coming to being, arise, and becoming, and how pastor, it traces back to, the pastor and the work he's doing right now in these last days. So I'm out of time. If you all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker. Future priest Obadiah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. When the peace of Yahweh is each and every one of you. Okay, so continuing on this theme of the hidden secrets of the 2 witnesses, I'll start off, and I'll be quoting from this book, The House of Yahweh Established. And can I have my first slide, please? So, the word Yobel, which also means Yabal from this book, on page 70, you can see that it says right there, Yabal, also Abel. And down here it says, and you also see from this information, the Hebrew word Yobel also developed from the word Yabal. It's the same thing. Yabel in simple gematria equals to 59. And can I have my next slide? 59 in Strong's Greek means, 59 Strong's Greek means to buy, bought, buying, make, purchase, or purchase. Also means to redeem. And it's from 58. Next slide, please. It's from 58, which means an assembly, place of assembly. Bring together, to gather. And from the Greek word igero, which is 1453, which means to waken. So next slide. 1453 Greek means to waken, to rise up. I wake, arouse, rise up, arise, arising, arises, awake. You know, the saints of Yahweh have been arose from the misunderstanding that you had. And in this book we can see that these secrets, the hidden secrets of the two witnesses, were not understood before. It's right here. It says, therefore the seed of the two witnesses will begin first in the world to shine forth as separated. You see, we are the seed of the two witnesses, and we're the first ones to start getting this knowledge. So the seed of the two witnesses will begin first in this world to shine forth as separated, distinct, and having understanding and wisdom, about this. So we also saw that 58 meant to gather. But also remember, those gathered by the body of Yeshua Messiah here at Abelin have been bought or have been purchased with a price. And this price, if you can please turn over with me to 1 Corinthians. In the book of Yahweh. 1 Corinthians on page 891. 891. That's 1 Corinthians 7:23. It says, you were bought with a price, do not become slaves of evil men. Also a few pages over to 2 Kepha 2:1. It's on page 961. 2 Kepha 2:1. It says, But there were also false prophets among the people then, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Redeemer who bought them, and bringing swift destruction upon themselves. So we've come across these words, Redeemer and the price. Redeemer and the price. So, a few pages over again to Revelation. Revelation chapter 5. On page 974, Revelation 5:9, and it says, and they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. To open the seals. Move a few lines down to still on the same page. That's chapter 6 and verse 1. It says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals. So it's the Lamb is the one who's opening the seals, and the Lamb is Yeshua. So it's Yeshua we're talking about here. Says, you're worthy to take this scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain and have redeemed us. In a few seconds we'll see what's talking about there. Us. That's in Revelation 14. Revelation 14:4. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 4 on page 980. And it says, these are the ones. Remember, we came across the word us. And Revelation 14:4 shows who that is. It says, these are the ones who are not defiled with the women, with women, forbidden assemblies, for they are virgins, cleansed and pure, yet the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, these were redeemed from among men, first fruits to Yahweh. So, we are redeemed. And these scriptures, from these scriptures, what we just read, we can see that the price that we were bought with is the blood of Yeshua Messiah. It's the blood of Yeshua Messiah, and also Yeshua Messiah is our Redeemer. And all these scriptures have been talking about our gathering together to Him, which is shown in 2 Thessalonians 2:1, and which is proven also to be at the place Yahweh chose to establish His name. Remember, Deuteronomy 12:5 says that Yahweh chose a place to establish His name, and He also says that at that place we must go. So, where can we find this place? It's in the west of the original work, which was started by the first righteous priest Abel. Speaking of west, turn with me over to Isaiah 43. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 5, page 557, and says, "Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your seed from the east and gather you from the west." And also Revelation 7:2 says, "And I saw another Malach ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Father, and he cried out with a loud voice to the four Malachim, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea." So it says, "And I saw another Malach ascending from the east." That's the seventh Malach coming from the east, bringing this message to the west. So it's in the west of the original ark started by the first righteous priest Abel in Genesis 4:2. And Abelin in Israel is spoken of in the book of Yahweh. It's in Luke chapter 3 verse 1. This is my last scripture. Luke chapter 3 verse 1. And it's on page 783. And it says, "Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, his Herod was tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip was tetrarch of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis, Lysanias was tetrarch of Abelin." So we see there's a place called Abelin. So we've got proof that this message was taken from the east and brought to the west. And this, in the west, is where you'll find the witnesses. And to continue on with the place of gathering, if you can all please stand. It's all ahead. I'll go ahead and welcome the next speaker, Deacon Yisrayl.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I'm going to be talking about the place of gathering and how there is only one place of gathering in these last days where we can find salvation. Now, one of the meanings of Abelin is the place of gathering. And you can find that on page 78 of the booklet, The House of Yahweh Established. Can I have my first slide? Okay, as you can see there, when you put the place of gathering into gematria, it equals 180. Okay, if I can have my second slide. So you can see the meaning of Strong's 180, and it means canal, and it comes from 2986. If I can have my next slide. And 2986 means bring, and it's a root, this word here, 2986, Yabal, is a root of Abel. And it means bring, lead, and led forth. Now, all of these meanings and more can be found in the publication, The House of Yahweh Established. Now, on page 72 of the booklet, The House of Yahweh Established, we see that Abel derived from the words Yobel and Yabal. And that is exactly what the place of gathering in gematria equals. Okay, if I can have my next slide. So here we see that Yabal means bring. It says bring, and you can see down at the bottom, Abel. Okay, and then it says Abel means bring. As you read the words bring, be brought, and bride, please remember the following words. So the hidden secrets of the two witnesses are being revealed. If I can have my next slide. Okay, so this is the Jewish gematria of the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Okay, it's number 3104. And if I can have my next slide. 3104 is Yobel. And it says Jubilee. And then at the bottom it says from Yabal. Okay, and if I have my next slide. Okay, so here we see the meaning of Yobel. And it says, year of Jubilee, blow the ram's horn, the year of acquittance. Inaugurated by blowing the ram's horn, year of acquittance. Okay, if I could have my next slide. Okay, so remember that 2986, which came from the gematria of the place of gathering. Remember, 180 went to 2986, which meant Yabal and bring. Okay, and you can see at the bottom, bring, lead, and led forth. And the word for it is Yobel. If I can have my next slide. Okay, so here we see Yabal Abel. I want you to know, now this is from the House of Yahweh established, page 80. It says, I want you now to notice the primary word Yabal and word Yabal in the lexicon. It says, which shows that the word Abel developed from the word Yabal. So we see Yabal there, and then down near the bottom, you see Yabal and then Abel. And they tie in together. Remember, it derived from that word. Okay. So what this is showing here is that the place of gathering is here in Abelin, Texas, and there's nowhere else where you could find salvation. There's no salvation outside of the house of Yahweh. Okay, now if I could have my next slide. Okay, this here is the logo. It was sent to Pastor, and he approved it. You can see here where it says OK, YH, and the date he signed is 6/14/2017. Okay, now that date, if I could have my next slide, right there, as you can see, means hidden. Okay, that was the logo that they had on, the one they had on Facebook that said the hidden secrets of the two witnesses, and when he signed it, the date 6/14, that means hidden. Plain and clear. So you can see that Yahweh is backing up the witness and all these things, praise Yahweh. Pastor wrote about these things in the booklet the House of Yahweh established, and now the numbers are backing it up and proving it. Okay, that's all the time I have, and with that, if you all stand, it's my great honor and privilege to turn over to the next speaker, the great Deacon Yisrayl David Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. I'd like you to be turning over to Revelation chapter 3 and verse 8. And remember, our subject today is the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. The hidden secrets of the two witnesses. And remember what Yahshua Messiah told us and his disciples, is that it's given to us to know the great secrets of Yahweh. Because, why? Because we keep his laws. And through obedience, we get understanding. That's why we can understand Yahweh's plan and his laws and his secrets, because we keep his laws. But Revelation chapter 3, and we're going to start with verse 8. And while we read this, and throughout this entire sermon and the rest of the sermons, I want you to remember the infinite plan, the infinite mind that Yahweh has, and his infinite plan in order to be able to map all these things out. I don't know if you've seen a mind map before, but you know how you write one subject and then you branch off of it and talk about the other subjects that it makes you think about. Imagine seeing a mind map of Yahweh's plan. Okay, I mean, it'll be enormous and fantastic because Yahweh's plan is so perfect, but everything ties together and goes back with each other. Revelation chapter 3, verse 8. I know your works. This was over 1,800 years ago, before Pastor was born, in 96 AY. That's over 1,800 years before Pastor was born, yet he can know his works. That's incredible. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it. For you have a little strength and have kept my word and have not denied my name. That open door, there's several open doors that Yahweh has opened. One of them is through the technology that started right when Pastor was born. The increase in knowledge. So, but he knows our works, that we keep the laws of Yahweh. We have not denied his name, which is his authority, and we keep his word, which the word is the laws of Yahweh. We keep the law strictly. And let's jump to verse 10. You have kept the word of my patience, which means you keep the laws of Yahweh. I will also keep you from the hour of temptation, which will come upon all the world to test those who dwell upon the earth. I come quickly. He's never said that to any other work, but he tells us he comes quickly. Hold fast that which you have, that no man take your crown, and he who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the house of my Father. He will never go out of it, and I will write upon him the name of my Father. The name of my Father. Remember that name means authority or power, leadership. Praise Yahweh, teachership, rulership, in order to lead and guide the entire universe. Now that power wouldn't be given to us if we didn't keep the laws of Yahweh. Obey the laws of Yahweh. And it wouldn't be given to Pastor if he didn't obey the laws of Yahweh. Teach, guard, and keep the laws of Yahweh. So remember that. All these things, all these blessings here were promised and prophesied to this last day's work, this seventh work, showing that we keep the law and we're led by this one Malach here, the last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. So let's be turning over to Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 7. We're still speaking about this last day's witness, this man clothed in linen. Daniel 12 and verse 7. It's written in 534 BY, and I want you to remember that. But Daniel 12 verse 7 says, Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, when he held up his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and vowed by him who lives forever, that it will be for a time, times and a half, when Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out his power, notice through his holy people. His power, that's that same name, authority, ability to lead, the position of leadership, that's that power, but it's through his holy people. Through this last day's work. Remember, they without us wouldn't even make it. It takes us to make it. That way we can pour out this power upon everybody that came before us. Without us, they wouldn't even receive this glory. That's how important this last day's work is. All these things will be finished. So this is the finishing work of that seventh messenger. But this was in 534 BY. If you look in your book of Yahweh, it's 534 BY when this was written. And remember what this scripture is talking about. This chapter is talking about the man clothed in linen. Can I have my first slide, please? 534 in Strong's Hebrew is branch. Branch. And the man clothed in linen is what? A branch. He is the branch, the chosen branch. So that's just one of those ways that it's linked. Yahweh's plan is linked, even through the numbers. Now this work will accomplish pouring out Yahweh's power, Yahweh's authority, Yahweh's name. Let's go to Revelation chapter 10. Revelation chapter 10 and verse 7. This is a familiar scripture that we should all have in our minds. Revelation chapter 10 and verse 7. It says, But in the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, once again speaking of the same person here, the same leader of this last day's work, when he will begin to sound, which means to teach, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets. Now you have to remember that in order to understand these secrets, you have to understand the plan of Yahweh. And in order to understand the plan of Yahweh, you have to keep his laws, because through this obedience comes understanding. So the secrets, where else did we find out about secrets? Let's go to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 12. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 12. It talks about secrets here. It says, because an excellent spirit, remember what spirit is. It's not some Holy Ghost thing. It's a spirit, which is the laws of Yahweh. The practicing and keeping the laws of Yahweh. Remember Yachanan 6:63, the laws that I give to you, these are spirit. Knowledge and understanding. What brings knowledge and understanding? Proverbs tells us that the reverence of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Was found in this Daniel. We're talking about Daniel here, but remember, Yahweh works with the one he has appointed in that time period. Spirit, knowledge, and understanding was found in this Daniel for the interpreting of dreams, solving of riddles and dark sayings, and dissolving of difficulties. And he was able to interpret the king's dream. This is Daniel 5, verse 12. And remember that number 512. Remember that number 512, because this same thing that Daniel had was also given to Pastor. And if you remember in Isaiah 11, verse 2 to 3, it talks about the spirit of knowledge, understanding, wisdom, power, might, all through keeping of Yahweh's laws. Remember, that's what spirit is. But remember that 512. What makes this last day's work so significant? What makes this last day's work so significant? And what makes Pastor so significant? You have to remember, it's that strict adherence to Yahweh's laws. Remember, Pastor said recently that from the time, since the beginning, since the time of Abel and Moshe, Yahweh's laws were, salvation was not available until this time period once again, because we strictly adhere to every word of Yahweh. Now I say strictly. What is strictness? You hear people say, well, I had to get strict with him and tell him about this here and make sure that he knew where I was coming from and, beat him down a little bit to make sure that he's a little bit lower than you. Is that being strict? That's not true strictness. You shouldn't have to get strict with somebody. You should be strict all the time, because strictness, praise Yahweh, strictness is not veering to the right or the left of Yahweh's laws. That's what strictness is, and we learned that in the Teachers of Righteousness. If you remember the Teachers of Righteousness workshops that we had years ago, we talked about what true strictness is. And if you think it's anything other than that, you need to read the Going On to Perfection sermons, because it talks about what that other attitude is. It's actually not controlling your emotions and hatred and all these other things. But strictness means you don't turn to the left or the right of Yahweh's laws when you teach. And that's what the man clothed in linen does. Remember what linen is. Linen is, as Revelation 19 tells us, the righteousness of the saints. So all these attributes the pastor has, everything that the last day's work does, points back to this righteousness, which is the keeping of Yahweh's laws. It all points back to righteousness. Can I get my next slide, please? The man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching. Now, the gematria for man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, is number 3072. That's Hebrew 3072 and 512. 3072 and 512. Can I get my next slide? 512. That's why I told you to remember the number 512, because Pastor had a dream on 512, 2015. If you remember, and he had no brakes. He was driving with a group of people. He had no brakes and was about to crash into the ocean. However, the vehicle stopped anyway, showing that Yahweh was in full control. Yahweh was in full control. So, remember what we talked about earlier in Daniel 5 verse 12? The ability to interpret dreams and understand these things? This is the same thing that took place here. Pastor was able to understand that Yahweh was in full control, just as Daniel was able to understand these dreams. Why? That spirit, that keeping of the laws of Yahweh. And remember, how is Yahweh in full control? How can we make Yahweh in control of our lives? How does Pastor know that Yahweh is in control of his life and his house? Yahweh said, if you obey my laws, I will be with you. Meaning, I will be in control. If you obey my laws, I will be in control. Can I get my next slide, please? Alright, so the next number from the gematria of man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, is 3072, which is Yahweh Sidkenu. Yahweh Sidkenu. And if you remember in Jeremiah, in fact, let's turn there. Jeremiah 23, verse 5 to 6, we see that word Yahweh Sidkenu. It says, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will raise to David a righteous branch, who we know as Yisrayl Hawkins. And a king will reign and succeed, and will execute judgment and justice in the earth. In his days Yada will be saved, and Israel will dwell safely, and this is the name that he will proclaim to them, at Abel. Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh our righteousness. So we have a branch, which is Yisrael Hawkins, and he's going to go out proclaiming, Yahweh Sidkenu! Yahweh Sidkenu, right? No. What does that mean? If Yahweh Sidkenu is Yahweh our righteousness, it means that branch, that witness, is going to be proclaiming or teaching how to be righteous, how to practice Yahweh's laws. And praise Yahweh. And through that teaching, Yada will be saved, and we will be brought out as the first fruits to Yahweh. And it says in verse 7 and 8, talking about how they will no longer say, they will no longer reference back to the days of Moshe, but look at the glory that Yahweh showed by bringing this last day's work out of the protected place to the place where he's gathered them. And they will dwell in their own land safely. That's all through the adherence to the laws of Yahweh that all this is done. Without it, it wouldn't take place. But Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh Sidkenu. Can I get my next slide? The gematria for Yahweh Sidkenu in English is 1074. And you can see there, that's the license plate of that's the tag number of pastor's license plate. And many sermons were brought out about that last year, about that license plate there. 1074 on that license plate. And that word also talks about first fruits, which is the same thing this scripture is talking about, us being gathered as the first fruits. The last work, which is the first fruits. But it will be brought out, this last day's work will be brought out safely into the protected place. Now, how is that done? That's done through Yisrayl Hawkins, the man clothed in linen, the branch, the teacher. And why? Because he adheres to strictly the laws of Yahweh. And we all keep and are striving to keep the laws of Yahweh. That's the only reason that we're promised this protection, this power, this authority, and this ability to be the finishing work. Because we keep the laws of Yahweh. If you'll all please stand. To continue on in this great message, I'd like to turn it over to the great Deacon David Knighton Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Get this stuff put out here. Okay, to revert back here just a moment, in the Two Witnesses book, on page 198, there was something that's very important here that we really need to point out. It shows, in Pastor's own words, where the understanding really started kicking in high gear. On page 198, Pastor was talking about a dream, a tragic dream, he says, I now realize when I went to Jacob's house and asked Jacob if he were ready to go to Israel to do the work we'd been called to do in the summer of 1990, because he'd seen this dream come true. But he says, I did not realize all the times that I had had this dream, the dream of the great tragedy, before that, of one of the witnesses. Anyway, I'll continue reading here. I did not realize all the times that I had this dream that my dream of a great tragedy did not involve someone else. This involved, and here it is right here, the death of one of Yahweh's two witnesses, spoken in prophecy in Isaiah 43:28. He goes on to say, now I understand that Yahweh had given me only a little of this truth about Jacob's death in order to reveal to me the complete truth concerning his two witnesses. But Yahweh only gives when it is his acceptable time. And before Jacob's death, all of this understanding was not given to me. So remember that Yahweh gives when it's his acceptable time. And that acceptable time is now on this understanding of this gematria and everything that's being brought forth with it. In fact, I'd like to go back one other thing real quick. One of the sons of Israel, Abel, spoke about this earlier. The number 912. The number 912 meaning son of Abba, and it tied into the number 5 and, crying out to Abba, Father. And what's really interesting about this, and all these coincidences keep taking place, it ought to be really getting in our mind that it's not a coincidence. It's there. It was planned. thousands of years ago, longer than that. I mean, Yahweh had this in His plan way back then and had it planned out to be written exactly right so that we could find it in these last days. But what's amazing is that 912, that word 912, it's found in the book of Yahweh on page 912, actually. In fact, if you'll turn there real quick, just so you can see it for yourself. Page 912. And it's Galatians 4, and verse 6. It says, let's look at verse 5 too. It says, in order that those who were under the subjection of the law might be redeemed by Him, so that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because you are His sons, Yahweh sent forth the Spirit of His Son in our hearts, which cries, Abba, Father. And that's on page 912. Now, that's amazing right there. It's just unbelievable how these numbers come together. It's when you start looking at it. Okay, let's go ahead and continue on here. If I could have my first slide. This is the gematria, the gematria of the laws of Yahweh. The laws of Yahweh in Jewish gematria equals 2502, and in English gematria equals 1074. That should ring a bell right there, that 1074. You just saw it a few moments ago. And then the laws of Yahweh in simple gematria equals 179. Now that 2502, can I have my next slide, please? The 2502 comes from Strong's Greek, Josiah, and it's from Hebrew 2977, Yeshaya, meaning Yahweh supports. Yahweh supports, and the foundation of Yahweh, founded, established by Yahweh. Okay, remember that, and we're going to move on here. What I'd like to do is look at the next slide, and Zechariah 5, 9 through 11. In Zechariah 5, 9 through 11, on page 719, Zechariah 5, 9 through 11, it speaks about the two witnesses establishing the house of Yahweh in a Babylonish land that was prophesied in, guess what, 519 before Yahshua. 519 before Yahshua. In fact, you can see that for yourself right there. What we need to do is just look right there on page 719 and see where it says chapter 5, and it says about 519 BY. You see that for yourself right there. All right, now, exactly 2,502 years later, all right, remember the numbers 2502, right, that we're looking at. And 2,502 years later, in 1983, the house of Yahweh was established. It was founded and supported by Yahweh, right? Praise Yahweh. And that goes back to the foundation of Yahweh, founded, established by Yahweh. That's that 2502. It's just amazing how these numbers line out. 2,500 years later, this takes place, and it's right there, the same number. That's amazing. If you look at the next slide, 2502 in Strong's Hebrew means to withdraw, ready, arm yourself, go like a soldier, deliver, equip for a fight, to strengthen and draw out. Well, the laws of Yahweh are the strength of Yahweh, just like it says in Proverbs 10:29. In fact, if you'll go to the next slide, I have a few things written down for you there. 2502, the laws of Yahweh are the strength of Yahweh. In Proverbs, they're written down there for you. Maybe you could jot them down real quick. Proverbs 10:29, Matthew 11:14, Romans 1:16. And these, the laws, they fully arm and equip a loyal soldier for this, well, it's a fight, but it's a fight for the faith of salvation. It's keeping that faith. It's preparing you for the faith. You could write down also for your notes 2 Timothy 2:3 and 3:17. And so a loyal soldier fully equipped. Ephesians 6:10 through 18. Ephesians. On page 920. Ephesians 6:10 through 18. It says, "Finally, my brothers, strengthen yourselves in Yahweh and in the power of His might. put on the whole armor of Yahweh. Remember that? Put on that whole armor, that you may be able to stand against the wiles, the crafty ways, and the schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not only against flesh and blood, but also against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, and against the spiritual forces of the evil one in the heavens. So in 13, therefore take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to stand or withstand in the evil day, and having overcome all, to stand. Stand, therefore, having your waist belted with the truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness, remember that 1074? Yahweh's righteousness, Yahweh Sidkenu. And having shod your feet with the preparation of the message of peace, that's the peaceful solution. And above all, taking the shield of the faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, again, like the deacon said, not some ghostly thing out there, but which is the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets. And then pray always with all entreaty and supplication in the Spirit. To this end, keep watch with all perseverance, always interceding for all the saints. All right, and so all these scriptures are written down here for you, if you'll jot them down. And then let's look at 1074 again. Just a brief look at that 1074 on the next slide. 1074 in Strong's Hebrew and in Strong's Greek right there. In Strong's Hebrew, it's first fruits. Firstborn from 1069, giving birth to bear or make early fruits. To give the birthright, new fruit from 1061, it means first fruits. The first fruits. Remember, we're the last of the first fruits, early ripened things, ripe fruit. 1074 in Strong's Greek is a generation. Remember, it's this generation and this nation, this family. It's the offspring from 1085, a family, a nation of kind. And from 1096 is come into being, come about to be born, and it signifies motion or movement or growth, and also a change of condition. Just briefly here, that same thing is showing that Yeshua Messiah is the firstborn from the dead, okay? The first sign of his Father's strength, or the ultimate result of keeping the law. Remember, you might jot down Revelation 1:5. You've got those written there or on the slide for you. The ultimate result of keeping the law, as Romans 10:14 shows, and then Deuteronomy 21:17, the firstborn of many brothers. It says, we, the house of Yahweh, are a holy nation. In Exodus 19:6 and 1 Kepha 2:9, and the last of the first fruits of Yahweh and the Lamb Yeshua, who will be the first in rank and authority, who've been growing in the womb of our mother, the house of Yahweh, and are about to be born into Yahweh's kingdom very soon. And that's very soon now. This is about to occur. Isaiah 66:8. It says, a seed shall serve him. It shall be accounted to Yahweh as a generation. And we're that family, that generation, that nation. And that's Psalms 22:30 for you. And finally, remember, 1074 again shows the last day's witness, Israel Hawkins' license tag. You remember that? Right there on the slide. Yahweh Sidkenu in English Gematria equals 1074. And that's Yahweh's righteousness. And remember, this really started kicking into high gear, and all this started coming out about the time that 10 Commandments sign and then the sign underneath was put up. Yahweh, our righteousness. You see that sign right there? That's Yahweh Sidkenu. Yahweh, our righteousness. Yahweh is our righteousness. The laws of Yahweh are our righteousness, okay? And that points to this house. That points to this family, these people. And it points to Yisrayl Hawkins, the one that brings all this knowledge forth. And in the last number is 179. If you look at the next slide, please. Okay, you've already got it up. Strong's Hebrew. Obil, the overseer of David's camels, from number 56. Obil means to mourn. And this is shown in one of the meanings of the name Abel or Abelin on page 74 and 75 of the book you see there. It's the house of Yahweh established. And then Strong's Greek, it's indissoluble. It cannot be broken. It cannot be broken up, not subject to destruction, permanent or endless. Remember, the gates of hell will not prevail against this house. Now, Yeshua Messiah said that the laws of Yahweh will never pass away. Matthew 24:35 and Luke 21:33. The prophets and apostles declared the laws of Yahweh are forever. And then in Psalms 119 and 160 and Deuteronomy 11:1, Ecclesiastes 3:14, Isaiah 48 and 1 Kepha 1:25, all point to these things. In Ecclesiastes 3:14, it says, I know that whatever Yahweh does, it will be forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor nothing taken away. Yahweh acts, and men will give him reverence. But all those scriptures are written down there for you, and I hope you have an opportunity to go back and look at these and really study them. Don't forget the 2 Witness book. You need that. And with that, if you'll all please stand. It's my great honor and privilege to present to you the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. I got great news. I'm the last speaker. Okay, you should be really excited about this information. This is just incredible. The hidden secrets of the 2 witnesses. And I would like you to put up my first slide because I want to remind you when all this began. 1934. Remember, the computer made its debut in 1934. Next slide. Remember this increase in knowledge that Daniel talked about in Daniel 12? Remember the nuclear bomb, July 4th, 1934. Leo Szilard, whose last name in Hungarian means Constantine. What an amazing thing. This great sword that was given. Okay, next slide, please. Here's Philo Farnsworth, the television. Think of the increase in knowledge that Daniel talked about that would be necessary to get this message to all these people out here that are going to be coming to the great house of Yahweh. August 25th, 1934. 3 days before the birth of the witness Yisrayl Hawkins, on the 70th anniversary of Pastor seeing the donkey in the sky. Y'all remember that. Remember these things. Don't forget. Next slide, please. Internet, conceived by this man, Paul Otlet, in 1934, who died on December 10th, exactly 70 years to the day that Pastor's face was seen in the wave in Scotland. Okay, he died on December 10th. Okay, the same day. 70 years. Okay, and all these things that were brought out about waves and how information travels on waves. Okay? Don't forget these things. This began in 1934. Next slide, please. Here's an increase in knowledge. The birth of the witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, right? That's an increase in knowledge, is it not, from Yahweh? I can't hear you. Hey, I know you're hungry, but come on. That's a huge increase in knowledge, because look at the knowledge that he's brought us in these last days. Born on August 28, 1934. Here's his birth certificate. Can you have the next slide, please? 1934. Let's go through some meanings here, okay? It's going to be a little bit maybe tedious for you, but we've got to go through it. Now it says 1934 means to become, come to pass. And I imagine in the 3rd book of Yahweh, or, the next edition, it'll say, and it came to pass that Yisrayl Hawkins was born on August 28, 1934, right? This is a huge event in history when this man was born. This sun was given to us. This light to this world was given to us to bring us out of darkness. It means to be, he became, it becomes, it means became, it means judge, it means take place. This next slide, please. It's from 1933, of all words, right? When was Yisrayl Hawkins conceived? If he was born August 28th, would he not have been conceived in around, maybe December, maybe on the 10th? Right? 9 months before? 1933, when Adolf Hitler rose to power. What a coincidence, right? And just like Moshe, just like Yeshua, search for the child and kill him. Okay? Somebody had to rise to power to kill the witness, to destroy this work, but it didn't work because the gates of hell will not prevail, right? 1933 means to be in the sense of existence, in existence in his mother's womb. And it says, see Hebrew Ava and Haya. So let's go to the next slide. That's 183. And it means, now get this meaning. To incline, to desire, to crave. Now think of Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, how he craves and desires righteousness. How he craves and desires to help every one of us. His dream on 5/12, was he not, what was it about? He said, I was worried about one of my sheep. Okay, he was craving for an answer. He wanted an answer. He needed an answer. The next word it's from is 1961. If I can have the next slide. Keep these meanings in mind. It means come to pass, appeared, became, came into being, come to pass. And it's interesting that 1961 would come into this, because this was right when Pastor and his brother, the two witnesses in Eastland, Texas, started their radio program, the Question and Answer Show, right? What a coincidence. You know, these numbers that are popping up here. If you go to my next slide, there's more meanings to 1961. It means came into being, brought, come to pass, exists, has become, numbered, pressed. Is he not pressed? Remember the great deacon that got up here, Deacon Samuel? Told you about this pressing of the olives, this pressure, this tribulation. Okay? It means running, surely come to pass. Running. That reminds me of when he's back here. Right? Running. He's always running, is he not? Sometimes he runs and he falls and he hurts himself. Racing young children, right? And he beats us too, I guarantee you, he beats us. Take place, turn, like as in turn the world around, right? Eventually here. Can I have my next slide? 1961. This word 1961 is the very word used in Exodus 3:14 that says, I am who I am. In other words, I exist. And I want you to think about this. The pi is 3.14, measuring a circle. 3.14 times the diameter is how you get the circumference of a circle. And remember, Yahweh says, I'm the Aleph and the Tau, the beginning and the end. Okay? Revelation 1:8 for your notes. Can I have my next slide? Now, the great deacon that spoke before the great deacon, Deacon Israel David, mentioned 534 meaning branch. And why is this important? Because this increase in knowledge is spoken of in Daniel 12, and it talks about the man clothed in linen that Daniel was talking about, Yisrayl Hawkins. I'm going to prove it to you. Not that you haven't already had enough proof, but let's get some more. 534, let's do the math, to 1934 is 2,468 years. Can I have my next slide? Now watch this. Pay attention to this meaning. It says to agree, to give self wholly to. Who does that describe? The one in unity with Yahweh, that agrees with Yahweh, that gives himself wholly to this work. Wholly to studying Yahweh's laws. Holy, I mean holy. There's no time for anything but the work of Yahweh with Yisrayl Hawkins. And it's from this little word down here. And remember, that ties into the definition of 1934. Remember, 183 meant the same thing. Let's tie in the next number. 1510 is what this comes from. Believe it or not, 2468 comes from Emi, which is 1510. And look what it means. I am. I exist. Isn't that mind-blowing that it would mean both things that 1934 meant in the Hebrew and the Greek? The number of years from when the branch was wrote about, 534 to 1934. I am who I am. I exist. I've always existed. It's kind of hard to fathom that, isn't it? But you know, with all the details that Yahweh is showing us in these numbers and in these prophecies, to me it is so mind-blowing. Okay? It is so mind-boggling and mind-blowing that I can't comprehend the mind of Yahweh. This mind that this being has must be so incredible. It's so incredible, House of Yahweh, that this mind that this being has. Is it any marvel that this being knows every hair on our head? Oh, I didn't give you the meaning of 1934 in the Greek yet. Sorry, I gave you a preview. Go to the next slide. 1934 in the Greek means to inquire for, seek after, desire, search for, make inquiries about. Go to the next slide. It's from 1909. Now watch this. The hidden secrets of the two witnesses. How does Pastor know what this man knows? Is it because he sits around twiddling his thumbs all day? No, he sits around and his thumbs are moving that page in that book of Yahweh. Okay? Watch, I'm going to prove it to you. Okay, 1909 means on the basis of, meaning here's why this witness knows what he knows, okay? Here's the basis of this whole thing. Go to the next slide. The other number was 2212. Here's the reason. It's because he seeks, he searches, he desires, he seeks, he searches. He gets to the bottom of a matter. He seeks after it like gold. He seeks after it. He doesn't care about gold. Do you understand that? He doesn't care about the riches of this world. Just wants to be called with Yahweh's name. Remember the song, the Ten Commandments, or the Great Commandment. This is what he seeks after, and it's from this Greek word punthanama. I'm not really great in Greek. Go to the next slide. It's 4441. Okay, 4441. It means to inquire, to learn, to ask, to inquire, to ascertain by inquiry, to understand. This is where he gets this great understanding, because he keeps Yahweh's laws and he begs and he pleads with Yahweh, please show me the answers. This is what he's doing. This is what we should be doing. We should not be wasting our time. There's no time to waste. It says to ascertain by inquiry, a search for something hidden. A search for something hidden. Remember, the great deacon Israel Abel got up here and he showed you 6:14 that goes to 6:13. It means hidden. Yes, it's hidden. But if our message is hidden, it's hidden to those that are lost. But it's being revealed to you, House of Yahweh, because you are the chosen of Yahweh to get this message first. It means to question. It means to question, which involves the idea of urgent need. Urgent need. Now notice, both 1934 in the Hebrew and in the Greek match the definitions of how many years from Daniel 5:34 to when this witness was born. The exact same definitions. On one side, I am, I exist. On the other side, to search, seek, and inquire, to desire and crave. My next slide, please. I'm almost done. Okay? Destruction of the temple. The next slide, please. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem at 70 to 1934 when Pastor was born. Turns out to be 864 years. Can I have my next slide, please? 1864 means south. Well, what would that mean? Well, the sermon was given before that in 1863 through 1865. You remember the slaves in the South were set free by the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865. You all remember that sermon? and how these numbers match history even? Yahweh is in full control. Do you understand, House of Yahweh? He's in full control. Now, south, if you'll go to that prophetic word with the white buffalo and the prophecy of the white buffalo, Pastor explains that word south means a freedom-loving nation. Where it talks about the king of the south, a freedom-loving nation. 1864, can you go to my next slide, is from the word doror, which is 1865. And guess what it means? It means a flowing, liberty, release. Remember, this is the number of years from the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem to the pastor's birth. It means liberty, release. Yobel. Remember everything that was just brought? Hello? I know you guys are right, and that's why you're not, right? Release. Release from what? And who brings this release? And where? Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins at the great House of Yahweh. Yobel, Yabal, Abel, bring. Remember these things. Go back and read them in the House of Yahweh established. Remember, Yobel, the year of acquittance is what it means. 1074, pastor's tag. Last slide, please. Put up that beautiful logo of the hidden secrets of the two witnesses. Now you know why. Now you know why this secret things belong to Yahweh, and the one he reveals it to is his servant Yisrayl Hawkins. No one else. Do you all agree and understand, brothers and sisters? Now, I have one thing I need to remind you of. Right here. You see this book? This beautiful book, The Two Witnesses. Tonight, there is a super new moon. Remember this. Remember this right here. There's a super new moon tonight. Be here at 6:45 for the family film, okay? And with that, if you'd all please stand. It's been a great honor and privilege to speak to you. May Yahweh bless you. Shabbat Shalom. And I'll turn it over to the great son of Israel, Abel, for closing prayer.